everybody, and welcome to our final episode of season 1 of History in a Drink with Sean and
Frank.
Excellent.
Tonight we're going to be talking about Moonshine, one of our favorite liquors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to go along with that, we're going to talk about NASCAR. So today's drink is a drink that I found online, and it is going to use blueberries because that's my favorite fruit, and lemon. And it also is going to have a little bit of brandy in it as well.
Ooh,
so the first thing we want to do is we want to take...
By the way, hold on. Hey, Mr. Larry Beggs, wish you were here in town, but I understand you're out in Steenhatchee doling stuff up, but wish you were here, sir. Sorry about that.
All right, so two slices of lemon.
Ooh.
And as we used the other week, the almond syrup.
Okay.
So just 1/4 ounce of that. Then you muddle them up.
Get the lemon juice out of the lemon wedges there. That sounds fantastic.
All right, then we're going to add a 1.5 ounces of Moonshine, which is the rest of this bottle.
Might as well.
That's right. That's how we do it. And then 3/4 ounce of brandy.
Oh,
Any
okay.
kind you want. We're using cognac. All right. Then 2 teaspoons of blueberry preserves.
Blueberry jelly. Into the drink. Or preserves. Into the drink.
Exactly.
All right.
All right. Then some ice. We'll mix that up.
And the nice thing about Moonshine is you can mix it right in mason jars. Easy to put a lid on, easy to shake. Instant shaker, ready to go.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it's also the wonderful to-go cup.
That it is.
All right. So then we'll just pour a little bit into each of these.
Excellent. The lid works great as a strainer on top of it. Fantastic.
All right.
And I see we have some garnishes of some lovely lemon and blueberry wedges to go right into our drinks. So that makes a fantastic drink.
All right.
Excellent. Cheers. Mmm.
Oh, that's good.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Very refreshing for summertime.
Exactly. So while I get started, why don't you get the drinks that I made up?
Oh, absolutely. So we got a couple.
So what we decided to do this time is you're going to have...
How much? Like mason jars here?
Yep, jelly jars, just like
jelly jars.
And so we'll pass those on to some of the people who are here with us tonight, and so they can try the drink with us. So tonight we want to talk about NASCAR, and really it is the one sport in the United States that gets its roots in moonshining and the process of bootlegging that happened then. So when we look at bootlegging, I actually found that bootlegging kind of started in Canada during World War I. So they passed a law in Canada that's saying that grain production and stuff like that had to go for war effort.
Okay.
So they could not make it into booze.
So if you were making booze, you were basically doing it kind of illegally.
Exactly.
As you were doing it. So.
And so the most famous booze runners were women up in Canada.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
So I decided to go on that tangent and look up some of the famous bootleggers that we have here in the United States who are women. Mm-hmm. And so the one that I found that was most interesting, her name was Maggie Bailey.
Okay.
She started running booze at age 17.
Excellent. All right. Started young.
She was known as the Queen of the Mountains. All right, because she was running it up in...
And this wasn't Canada. This was here in the United States. Okay.
And when she would get arrested, the judges called her the Queen of Search and Seizure because she knew search and seizure laws inside and out because she knew that they were going to have to figure out how to get around that to search her car.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
when is it? What time period is this?
This is the 1920s during
Prohibition. Is Prohibition.
Exactly. And then one of the other ones was, her name was Willie Carter Sharp, and she transported 220,000 gallons of moonshine between 1926 and 1931.
Holy smokes, okay.
And when you think about it, so...
Cheers to you, ma'am. Cheers to you.
Exactly. What they were doing is they would modify the cars. So they took old Ford Model Ts and stuff like that, and they would add extra gas tanks.
They want to make them look, though, like they were a stock regular car. They wouldn't want to
Exactly.
soup them up. They wouldn't do anything.
Well, they would soup them up, but they would hide.
But you wouldn't. It wouldn't look like they were souped up.
Correct. And what they needed, though, was the Ford V8 engine, because in some cases they were carrying an extra 1,000 pounds of booze
in a liquid format, which is heavy.
Exactly.
Heavy, yeah.
And so the Model Q of the Ford brand actually had a really strong, tight chassis.
Okay.
And so that was the preferred car during the 1930s that they would soup up for it, because it could hold that extra weight.
Sure.
Now, my grandpa Onyx always would tell a story when we were kids growing up that we grew up in Cleveland, and in the wintertime, Lake Erie freezes. And so the bootleggers would run booze from Canada across the lake.
Across the lake, literally on the frozen water.
On the frozen water. So what they would do is they would chop the tops off of the car.
Okay.
In case they hit a patch that was not thick enough for them, and the car would go under, so they could get out.
Oh, so the first of the convertibles, really.
Exactly.
So they were escape hatch.
Yeah. So places like Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, where you had Canada right across the way, that's where they were running booze. Also along the Canadian border, places like Minnesota. I found a lot of booze runners in North and South Dakota as well, and Montana. So those are all those border states to Canada. So they were
one of the famous movies that I'm trying to think of with
Untouchables.
Well, Untouchables, but even going to Legends of the Fall with Brad Pitt.
Right.
Brad Pitt was, here he is in the Dakotas, basically, and he was running stuff down from Camden. And that was a key part of that movie during that same time period.
Exactly. Yeah. Because there was such a demand for alcohol.
Yeah.
So to me, it was really interesting seeing the types of cars. And so Prohibition ends in 1933, and we begin to see in the late 30s some of the idea of car racing.
Okay.
But initially, they didn't let bootleggers race because they thought they were a negative part of society, and they didn't want that
image tied to the NASCAR image.
Exactly.
Okay.
So NASCAR really starts after World War II.
Okay.
And we start to see that they're using some of these new stock cars that are coming off of the production line, because during the war they didn't make cars for the average person to buy. It was all being used to build vehicles and
for the war
effort. Mm-hmm. And so NASCAR is created in 1948, I believe. Yeah, February 48 is the first race, and it takes place in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Okay, which is right in our backyard.
Exactly.
So.
And the first races, I wish I was there to kind of see them, because they used to race 1.5 miles on the beach and then 1.5 miles on A1A on the blacktop.
So it would have to be in the sand and the asphalt.
Exactly.
Wow.
And they had really tight curves in between that were rutted and stuff. And when I was looking at the speeds that were the top speeds during that period of time, we're talking like 45 to 55 miles per hour. My kid drives that out the driveway. Yeah. So when we look at
she does.
And
they both do.
So, and Anna probably will be even faster.
Yeah.
But as we look at that is speeds that we didn't think and take for granted.
Totally, yeah.
That's driving down 41.
But for them, that's
fast.
That's fast.
Now,
I would also think too that some of these guys that are running the race, why they may have looked down on the bootleggers, that idea of going through the, basically eluding the police and eluding the things, that was part of the skills in that racing that these drivers got.
Exactly. There's actually a turn called the bootlegger turn, which is a 180-degree turn to get away from the police, and it still goes by that name, the bootlegger turn. But that was the whole thing. But what was interesting is the audience for NASCAR early on is really in the South.
Okay.
And in the first couple races that they tried where they wanted to eliminate the bootleggers, the crowds were pissed because these were guys that they had known.
They're heroes.
Exactly. And so that is one of the big things that we see is they want these guys in the race. And NASCAR buys into that and lets them. And the most famous early moonshiner that runs races in NASCAR, his name was Junior Johnson. And he, I think he drove a Ford. But also when we look at these cars back then, these bad boys were made out of steel. They are heavy. You know, one of the other famous early brothers groups that was racing were the Flock brothers, and they drove a Hudson Hornet.
Hudson Hornet. That sounds like the Disney movie
from Cars.
From Cars, yes.
So the Doc character is based on those guys in that early 1940s.
When he would do the turns and do the race.
In the dirt.
Yep, in the dirt.
Because all of these tracks early on were a combination of either dirt or sand and asphalt.
Yeah.
So when we look at the car racing then, those cars weighed a ton.
Yeah.
Literally 3 or 4 tons. Growing up, my Uncle Barry, he was refinishing a Hudson. And I remember that car, and it was huge. And I think it weighed like 7,500 pounds.
Holy smokes.
So, you know, a big V8 engine in there.
Right.
It's still not going to move it.
It's still going to be a beast.
Yeah, that fast. Because when we think of our cars today.
Well, I think that the idea of the stock car racing was that it was stock, that the body of it, this was a car that anybody could go and buy, and then all the things that they did to it to make it faster, to make it whatever. But that was the thing that put everybody on a level playing field.
Exactly. And then you have also in the 1950s where old used cars from the 1920s and 30s were affordable for parents to buy for their kids. So if you think about those kids during the 50s and 60s
that are souping their cars up and
like
cruising the Miracle Mile,
right? Like in American Graffiti and stuff like that. So I always heard of my dad and his buddies souping up their cars and stuff like that, and going to speedways. That I'm sure they did it on the roads too, but we never got told those stories. But they would go and race the cars, and it would look like a normal car, but they had souped up the engine, added all that other kind of stuff in it. Now, what was also interesting is how much of NASCAR has become a pop culture item. So we got to go on a trip this past October, and we went and stopped in Talladega to see and get some pictures taken where one of our favorite movies is
Rick and Bobby.
Exactly.
If you're not first, you're last, right, Jennifer? If you're not first, you're last.
Exactly. So the races have become huge events.
Yes.
So when I lived in North Carolina, we lived near Wilkesboro, and one of the original raceways is in North Wilkesboro, and
North Carolina.
In North Carolina, exactly. Now, when I was talking about Daytona, the racetrack at Daytona is about 4 miles long originally. Right. This racetrack at North Wilkesboro was 0.625 miles long.
So just a little over half a mile.
Yeah. Tiny.
That is, just to put in perspective, if you guys ever go to a track meet, like for high school, that's just 2 laps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So this track, and what was interesting about it is on one of the straightaways, it went uphill, and on the other one, it went downhill. It was originally a dirt track, and then later on, they asphalted it and all of that kind of stuff. But the fastest lap there, 18 seconds.
Oh, these smokes.
And so think about how many laps you got to do if you're doing 300 or 400 miles, and how tight those turns are. And so to me, it was fascinating to think about that, because when I was there, it wasn't open.
Yeah.
It had closed down in the 90s.
Okay.
And it's been bought, and they kind of race other ones, but they don't do NASCAR there anymore. But to me, that's short of a race. Think about you in the stands, and that was what the owner of
you're
it,
just constantly just watching them go around.
And the owner of it, he kept the stadium for the fans, not for owners, not for the rich people and stuff like that. He wanted as many fans to come in there, so he never built up boxes and the skyboxes and all that kind of stuff. And year after year after year, it would be sold out. And early on, he would have 2 races, one in the spring and one in the fall there.
Yeah.
So I found that really interesting to look at that. Now, as we're looking at that raceway, all right, the fastest speed ever on that raceway was 107 miles an hour.
Which is nothing compared to modern.
But think about, you're basically doing a circle at 107 miles an hour.
Wow.
So, to me, it would have been fascinating to see like centrifugal force and all of that kind of stuff.
It's got to be 10 times worse than it is for any, modern race car track.
Exactly. Wow. And think of all the bumping and stuff that goes on in regular NASCAR. And here,
it ain't rubbing, it's racing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. What some of the other stuff in pop culture too is, if we think about us growing up as kids.
Yeah.
What was the show that you can think of that went along with bootlegging and racing cars?
So the only one that I remember was one of my personal favorites. Was the General Lee and when they hit the horn and that would go on through, and that was the Duke Boys.
Exactly. And that's all about moonshining.
Yeah.
And
Uncle Jesse. Uncle Jesse was running the liquor through, because Hazard was a dry county, if I remember right.
And I was looking at the premise of the show, and the setup for it is the Bo and Luke Duke are on probation for bootlegging, and the way that they got out of jail was Uncle Jesse promised the feds that he wouldn't make moonshine anymore.
Which obviously was not the case, because they ran it all over the place.
Exactly.
Too. They had Cooter fix up the car.
Exactly, and you think about that.
Boss Hogg and what was the sheriff name?
Cletus. No.
Roscoe Pico.
Roscoe Pico Train and
Flash.
And Flash, his dog, the Basset Hound. Yes.
Exactly.
I get them Duke Boys.
But we think about that today, and I go back and watch an episode, and you look at and you see how it is geared towards the South, especially after what we saw this past weekend at Talladega with the idea of someone putting a noose in the race, the area for the one black NASCAR driver. And if you saw what all the sport did and backing him up and all of that, if you haven't, go look at it.
I think they had a bunch of the individual drivers actually went out and they themselves pushed his car onto the track, onto the starting line, which is incredibly brave and great of them.
Exactly. And as we've seen, they have banned the Confederate battle flag at any NASCAR events.
Yep.
So, but when you think of the General Lee, the whole top of it is the Confederate battle flag.
Yeah.
And played Dixie,
Yeah.
being called the General Lee.
Yeah.
Now I found out that that TV show is based on a real moonshiner's life, and the name of the show was, or the original movie was called Moonshine, and it was a movie in 1975, and Jeff Bridges played the main character.
Okay.
And they called their car, it was called Traveler, all right, which was Robert E. Lee's horse. So
it still had ties to.
Exactly. It was supposed to be that name Traveler as well, but the producer said General Lee would get more of a punch and more.
I would say not people would know what Traveler was.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. And then as you think of the other one, what movie comes out in 1977 is also about bootlegging?
Well, that would have to be one of my personal favorites, with actually good old Florida boy, went to University of Florida.
No.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Florida State University. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Florida State University, that would be actually the sports stars are named after Mr. Burt Reynolds, and he was Smokey and the Bandit. He was the bandit in Smokey and the Bandit.
Exactly.
Eastbound and Down. That's where he was going.
Right, and that was the second highest grossing movie in 1977.
Holy smokes.
Behind Star Wars.
Wow.
All right.
Nice.
And that movie was made,
which also had smugglers in it.
Exactly.
Of all things.
It was it was a small budget movie.
Yeah.
It had like a $4.5 million budget, of which Burt Reynolds got $1 million of it.
Oh. And
they basically ad-libbed everything. Almost all of Jackie Gleason's stuff in there is ad-libbed stuff. And his character is based off a real Florida highway patrolman.
I can totally believe that.
And Buford T. Justice.
Buford T. Justice.
And his use of the word some bitch instead of son of a bitch is a word that as a kid we would say behind my parents' back, because that was quite humorous and
Yes,
stuff.
absolutely.
So, but they were bootlegging Coors beer because you couldn't bring Coors east of the Mississippi River. So it is interesting how moonshining and bootlegging play a huge role in pop culture throughout. Now, one of the other things that I'm going to tell you guys, Hasbro has stopped making all paraphernalia and merchandise that goes with the Dukes of Hazzard. Oh. They stopped making it in 2015. So all of that stuff now is collector's items, and it's never going to be made again. So I'm going to have to go dig through my Hot Wheels collection at home.
Which I'm torn, because I'm very happy that we're, as a society, is understanding things a little better and where that comes from. Right. But at the same time, that's kind of what we grew up with, and it was, man.
Exactly.
I like I like Daisy Duke more than Bone Duke. But it's what it was.
Especially now. So, but as we look at it, to me, it was really fascinating to see how this plays so much into our pop culture and how much we really kind of think about it and have it. And I was looking at other things, and you see that there are so many references to bootlegging in all kinds of movie and smuggling and all of that kind of stuff throughout. So I suggest you go and look some of them up. If you're interested in seeing another movie by Burt Reynolds that's about that, it is called White Lightning. Yeah. And he's got a second movie to it called Gator. So, and I believe they're both taped here in Florida and stuff like that. And I think one of them is actually taped here in Sarasota.
Possibly. Now,
when they were building.
Now, when you're looking at Burt Reynolds movies, there's one you probably don't want to see, and that involved them on a canoe trip. So just ignore
up in North Carolina.
Ignore that one. Don't.
I'm sure they had some moonshine on that.
They probably had some moonshine on that too, but that's probably not a good movie. And go see Smokey and the Bandit. Much better.
Actually, that movie Deliverance was based on where we lived in Wilkes County, North Carolina. Yeah. So
there's whole bunches of places through the South that's based on.
Yeah, exactly. But we got a whole nother show.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show on that one too. So now back to just once again to our drink, to moonshine specifically. So moonshine is kind of the general term for basically just straight alcohol. I mean, this is we're not making it fancy. We're not storing it. We're not using molasses and sugar to make it rum. We're not using, different grains to make it vodka. We're not, even the whiskey, the storing that. This is the stuff that's coming off the still. That's the straight stuff. And actually, it's had a huge resurgence to where actually there's a bunch of companies. We have back behind us here. Sugarlands is a local company, Old Smoky as well. I have to throw a big thank you out to Tracy Probst, who actually went through and did a tour of one of the distilleries, brought me back a bunch of really good stuff that we've been working and trying on tonight. But we've had some great taste. So there's a resurgence of just that great flavored plain alcohol.
And if you're lucky, you can still find there are enough people who are still making moonshine. And we have
a friend of a friend of a friend, kind of back in the hills, kind of that.
Exactly. In places like Alabama and Mississippi and North Carolina. And it is some of the best stuff that I've ever had, especially put it in the freezer for a little bit, get it nice and cold, and it's smooth as anything else.
Has the consistency of syrup, and it's good stuff. So the only trick for it is when it's coming off of that still and coming off there, you're looking at something that's probably right around 180 proof, 160 proof, something like that, to where it hasn't been distilled down like some of the stuff that you'll see in, at the liquor store. But if you got somebody who can get you some and know it, it's fantastic stuff. You should try it out. Just don't drink too much.
Exactly. Yeah. So this has been a really fun experiment for us doing this first full season. 10
episodes.
10 episodes. And I hope that you've learned a little bit of history here. I hope that you have tried some new drinks and some new liquor that you may not have tried, and some beer as well. So what we're planning on doing is we're planning to do a wrap-up next week where we're going to go back and kind of talk about the different drinks that we've made over this first season. And so please,
we would love to see some posts from you guys and some direct messages. Hey, what was your favorite? What did you learn the most? What were you like? Oh my God, I had no idea about that.
Exactly.
I had no idea Hemingway had a gun on his boat in World War II. That kind of stuff.
Exactly. And all of the other interesting things that you found that you could use out of here. Like my wife says, that I'm full of useless knowledge that's perfect for Trivial Pursuit. Because
my wife says the same thing. That's awesome.
So, but as we're starting to think about season 2, we are kind of thinking that we want to expand it out a little bit. Yeah. And so we're looking at having a studio audience here that is comes every week.
Yeah.
And we're looking at how do we want to put this?
So in general, Tuesday nights are kind of a fun night for us. And so one of the things, besides having our drinks, having our awesome time at 8 o'clock and to talk to you guys about what we do, we usually, Frank and I kind of makes it a time for us to, we usually cook on the grill, and we actually try to do a meal tied with whatever we're drinking tonight. So tonight we did some cool smoked sausages. Last week with Hawaiian, we did Hawaiian pineapple pork ribs. So we do like a meal tied to our drinks, tied to our whole presentation, and we have so much fun when we have a studio audience with us.
Exactly. So
here in the Wrecking Bar, if you haven't been to the Wrecking Bar.
So what we're thinking about is having 10 people here as our studio audience. Yep. And what we're going to do is it'll be $100 for a ticket to come to season 2, all 10 episodes.
Yep. So $10 a week gets you dinner, your drinks, hang out, be part of the studio audience here, have an awesome time, and help fund our fun venture here if you guys like watching what you do.
Exactly. So we look forward to seeing you next week in our recap. And we already got
Bob. One of our local audience just already had one and gave us some money. So thank you, Bob. We'll see you next season.
I think that was Eric, not Bob.
Was it Eric? Either one, that'll work
Bob
too.
Never has $100 on him.
You know what? We should actually try some of this moonshine. Oh, wait a minute. Where did this moonshine go? Did you drink this?
I didn't drink it.
Oh, man. What's going on here?
All right. So we'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good one.
Absolutely. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.